My name's Ariana. I'm 26, and in my family, weakness isn't just frowned upon, it's ammunition. They've turned tough love into a sport, keeping an invisible scoreboard of my so-called failures. Show up late? -1. Decline to laugh at a cruel joke? -2. Admit you're tired? That's a full-blown penalty. My dad, Richard, leads the charge with his trademark, quit faking it. My brother Daniel is his eager sidekick, tossing in sarcastic jabs like it's some comedy routine. Aunt Melissa wraps her digs in honeyed concern, and my mom, she stays quiet, as if silence will keep her safe. For years I played along, smiling through the burns, telling myself it was easier to keep the peace than fight a battle I couldn't win. I thought I'd learned to survive their games until the day I could barely breathe, and they decided it was just another excuse. Family gatherings in my world aren't about catching up or sharing a meal. They're about surviving the unspoken gauntlet, a series of little tests no one admits to giving but everyone plays. This one was at my parents' house, which meant there was no easy escape. If I skipped, it would prove I was sulking. If I went, I'd be trapped under the same roof as the people who knew exactly how to get under my skin. The plan was always the same: eat, make small talk, then clean up for hours while my dad and Daniel lounged on the couch watching whatever game was on. That morning, I'd told myself to just get through it quietly. Show up on time, bring something nice, keep my head down. I arrived 5 minutes early, dessert in hand, because heaven forbid I give them another reason to roll their eyes. My mom, Linda, answered the door. Her smile was polite but tired, like she was already bracing for the night ahead. "Least you could do," she said, glancing at the pie I'd brought, then walked off toward the kitchen. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of grilled meat and something tangy, probably one of Aunt Melissa's homemade sauces. She was in the dining room arranging platters, calling over her shoulder about how much work she'd done. Daniel was nowhere near the prep, of course. I found him in the living room, stretched out on the recliner, phone in hand, looking like he'd been there all day. "Wow, Ariana actually showed up on time," he said without looking up. "Miracles do happen." I swallowed the retort on my tongue. First test of the night passed. Ignore the bait. By the time everyone arrived, the chatter was loud but laced with tension. I could feel their eyes flick toward me whenever I didn't laugh at Daniel's one-liners. I kept myself busy refilling drinks, carrying trays outside, helping Mom keep the kitchen from turning into chaos. It was hot, not just warm, but the kind of heavy summer heat that clung to your skin. After my third trip from the yard to the kitchen, I felt a tightness in my chest. At first, I thought it was just from moving too fast, but it didn't go away when I stopped. I leaned against the counter for a second, trying to take a deeper breath. That's when my dad's voice cut through the room from across the kitchen. "Quit faking it." His eyes narrowed, like I'd just been caught sneaking out of a chore. I started, but Daniel's voice overlapped mine. "She's just trying to get out of helping." Classic Ariana. Aunt Melissa chuckled from the table. "You've always been a bit fragile, haven't you?" I wanted to tell them something was wrong, but the words stuck in my throat right next to the air I couldn't seem to pull in deep enough. The tightness in my chest didn't ease. If anything, it sharpened a pressure pressing from the inside out, like someone had cinched a belt around my ribs. My breath came in shallow pulls, and a light buzz crept along my fingertips. I gripped the counter, willing it to pass. All I needed was a minute. Just a minute to breathe and steady myself. But the voices behind me wouldn't quit. "Come on, Ari," Daniel called from the living room. "Don't leave Mom with all the work. You're not that delicate." Melissa's laugh was soft but laced with condescension. "It's probably just the heat. Have some water and get back to it." I straightened, tried to take another breath, but it caught halfway down. The room tilted. My skin prickled under a layer of cold sweat. "I really don't feel," I started, but my dad cut me off. "Don't start this. We've got dishes piling up and you're standing there like you're about to faint on cue." The words landed like a slap, not because they were new, they weren't, but because there was no space left in me to defend myself. Every inhale felt like I was sipping air through a straw. I stepped toward the table, aiming for the nearest chair, but my knees buckled. My hand shot out to the wall to keep from collapsing completely. That, at least, got Daniel's attention, though not in the way I needed. Man, you're dramatic, he said with a grin. Ever think about theater? You'd be a hit. My pulse pounded in my ears, each beat too fast, too loud. A flicker of panic lit in my chest, not the emotional kind, but the kind your body sends when something is wrong. Very wrong. Somewhere across the room, I heard my mom's voice, hesitant. Richard, maybe we should. She didn't finish, because a sharper voice cut through the noise. Someone call an ambulance. I didn't see who said it. The edges of my vision had started to blur, the colors bleeding into each other. My legs trembled, and I focused on staying upright as footsteps rushed past. A moment later, a man in a dark uniform knelt in front of me. Ma'am, can you hear me? His voice was calm but quick. I nodded or thought I did. The world felt muffled, like I was underwater. How long have you been having trouble breathing? He asked, fingers pressing against my neck. I tried to answer, but it came out as a thin, strained gasp. His expression shifted instantly. We need a stretcher now. He barked toward the doorway. The noise in the room changed. Chairs scraped. Conversations died mid-sentence. My dad's face went still, like someone had hit pause. Daniel's smirk faded into something unreadable. For the first time that night, no one had anything to say. Hands lifted me under the arms, guiding me toward the door. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, stiff, shaky, barely cooperating. The EMT's voice stayed close to my ear. We've got you. Just focus on breathing. I tried. God. I tried. But each inhale still felt locked. Like there was no space left in my lungs. The stretcher appeared in front of me. I don't even remember lying down, just the jolt of the straps being buckled across my chest and legs. The air inside the room shifted again. Conversations were replaced by the purposeful rustle of the EMT team moving around me. From the corner of my eye, I saw Melissa standing at the table, her coffee cup halfway to her lips, her face pale. Richard stood with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, like he was still deciding whether this was all an elaborate performance. Daniel hovered by the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets. His voice came out quieter than before, but I still caught the words. She's probably just worked herself up. It's nothing, nothing. The EMT beside me didn't even glance his way. Her pulses elevated, breathing compromised. Let's move. His tone cut through the last of the background noise. The stretcher rolled forward, wheels bumping over the threshold. A blast of cooler air hit me as we reached the porch, and for the first time in minutes, I felt like I could pull in just a little more oxygen. Someone, maybe my mom, called my name from behind, but it was swallowed by the closing ambulance doors. Inside, the light was harsh and white. The EMT, Mike, clipped an oxygen mask over my face. Breathe with me, he said, his voice steady, almost rhythmic. In and out, slow as you can. I clung to his voice like a lifeline. My chest burned, but the mask's cool air started to chip away at the panic. Do you have any known allergies? He asked. Not, I broke into a cough. Not sure, never like this. He nodded. We'll run tests. But you need to know if the call had been delayed even a few more minutes. This could have been critical. Critical. My stomach dropped at the word. Through the back window, the house grew smaller. I thought about everyone still standing inside, probably already spinning the story into something easier to swallow. Melissa would tell people I'd overreacted. Richard would say the EMT was just being cautious. Daniel, he'd probably make a joke about my grand exit. I should have been focusing on my breathing, on the growing steadiness of my pulse. But the ache in my chest wasn't just physical anymore. It was the hollow, leaden weight of knowing that even now, strapped to a stretcher, oxygen mask on my face, my family still didn't believe me. And that hurt more than anything the reaction was doing to my body. The ambulance ride blurred into a mix of sirens, oxygen hiss, and Mike's calm voice asking questions I could barely answer. By the time we reached the ER, my chest had loosened just enough for me to speak in short sentences. Inside, the fluorescent lights seemed even harsher than the ones in the ambulance. Nurses wheeled me into a curtained bay, attaching monitors that beeped steadily. Every sound felt magnified, the scratch of a pen, the crinkle of gloves, my own ragged breathing. A doctor appeared, his expression serious but not alarmed. Ariana, I'm Dr. Harris. We're going to run some tests, but from what your vitals show, you've experienced a significant allergic reaction. You're stable now, but your airway was constricting and your blood pressure dropped. That's not something to brush off. His words carried weight, but they also carried relief, someone finally naming what was happening. The curtain shifted, and there they were. Richard, Melissa, and my mom. Daniel wasn't with them. Richard leaned against the doorway, arms still crossed. "You good?" he asked, like I'd just finished mowing the lawn. Dr. Harris's gaze flicked to him, then back to me. She could have gone into anaphylaxis. This was life-threatening. Melissa gave a tight smile. "We've all had food disagree with us before. You just push through." The doctor didn't even try to hide his disapproval. "No, you don't push through when someone's airway is closing. This isn't about being dramatic. 10 more minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation right now." Silence. My mom shifted her weight, eyes on the floor. Richard's jaw flexed like he was biting back a retort. After more tests and a dose of medication, Dr. Harris confirmed what I hadn't realized: they wanted to keep me overnight for observation. "We need to ensure there's no secondary reaction. You'll also need a follow-up allergy panel." Melissa sighed, glancing at Richard. "Well, if you're just staying for observation, I guess we'll head out." "Got things to do." They left before I could respond. My mom muttered something about needing to clean up after the cookout and followed them. By morning, the only people I'd spoken to were nurses. The discharge nurse arranged for a volunteer driver to take me home since, apparently, my family wasn't available. When I stepped into my apartment, still weak, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Glad you're feeling better. Don't forget the family reunion in 2 weeks." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an expectation that I'd show up like always, ready to play the role they'd assigned me. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, and let the message burn into me. The hurt was still there, but something else had begun to surface beneath it. A low, steady heat. If they could stand in a hospital room, hear a doctor say I could have died, and still reduce it to pushing through, then nothing I said would ever change their minds. But maybe, just maybe, I could change the way the game was played. 2 weeks later, I stood outside Melissa's immaculate suburban house, pie in hand, the same way I had at my parents' place. I hadn't wanted to come, but I knew if I didn't, the story of my absence would morph into another convenient lie about me, holding grudges. Melissa flung open the door before I could knock. Her hostess smile was bright, almost blinding. "Ariana, feeling better? You look fine now. Guess it wasn't as bad as they made it sound, huh?" She said it just loud enough for the group of relatives behind her to hear. A few chuckles rippled through them. I stepped inside, taking in the spread on the dining table. Every dish was unlabeled, a minefield for someone still waiting on detailed allergy results. I asked Melissa quietly if she could tell me what was in a few dishes. She waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be dramatic. It's all homemade. You're not going to have another one of your episodes." Episodes, like it was a sitcom gag. I settled for a plain roll and salad, but even that didn't go unnoticed. Daniel, already halfway through a plate stacked high with barbecue, pointed at me. "Still milking that barbecue thing, huh? You should just get over it." My dad smirked instead of shutting him down. For the first hour, I kept my head down, making small talk with the few relatives who weren't obviously enjoying the sport of mocking me. But then, the announcement came. "Game time," Melissa called, clapping her hands. In past years, this had been trivia or charades, harmless enough. But when I saw an envelope on the counter with my name on it, my stomach tightened. "What's that?" I asked. Melissa's smile widened. "A little surprise, you'll see." When it was my turn, she called everyone into the living room. "All right, everyone, this round's special. We're playing Guess the Lie, starring Ariana." My mouth went dry. She explained the rules. They'd read 3 stories about me, 2 true, 1 false. Everyone had to guess the fake one. The first story. I spilled a drink on a cousin at a wedding and blamed the bartender. True, though I'd been 15 and mortified. The second. I faked being sick at last year's reunion to avoid cleaning. Completely false. The third. The cookout 2 weeks ago. where I supposedly pretended I couldn't breathe so I could skip dish duty. In their version, the EMT said it was just nerves, and I looked totally fine, leaving in the ambulance. Laughter broke out before she even finished. They were laughing at the thing that had almost killed me. My hands trembled, heat climbing my neck. Daniel grinned. My dad chuckled. My mom sat stiffly, saying nothing. Melissa held up the envelope. Here's the fun part. If you guess right, you get this 50 gift card. If no one guesses, Ariana gets it. The guesses flew. Enough people chose the cookout story as true that Melissa handed the envelope to Daniel. He tore it open, revealing a voucher for a barbecue restaurant. I felt my stomach drop so fast I thought I might actually be sick. This wasn't just mocking. This was deliberate, targeted cruelty rewarding the person who'd mocked me most with a prize that rubbed my allergic reaction in my face. I left without saying goodbye. The drive home was quiet except for the replay in my head. The laughter, the smirks, the barbecue voucher. Whatever sliver of trust I'd been holding on to was gone. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a performance, and I was their favorite punchline. Somewhere between Melissa's driveway and my apartment, the hurt hardened into something sharper. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this. The next time we were all in a room together, the script would be mine. The week after the reunion, I ignored every call that came from my family's area code. Melissa left a voicemail about needing me to bring dessert for Daniel's birthday. My dad texted a reminder about a family workday at his house. Both went unanswered. I thought it would feel rebellious. Instead, it felt quiet, hollow. I got up, went to work, came home, made something simple to eat. I wasn't angry in the explosive way I'd been after the barbecue voucher. I was tired, bone-deep tired, but underneath that exhaustion was a slow, steady current of resolve. The moment that solidified it came a week later, when the allergy panel results arrived. Severe reaction to a specific ingredient enough that I'd been lucky the EMT got to me when he did. The doctor told me to carry an EpiPen at all times and avoid any trace of that ingredient. I stared at the report, feeling the weight of it in my hands. This wasn't just my word against theirs anymore. It was documented fact. And they had laughed. Not in the heat of the moment, they'd built a game around it. I didn't send them the results. Instead, I slid the paper into a folder in my desk drawer, right next to my lease and my passport. The important things you don't leave lying around. With the family drama on mute, my energy had to go somewhere. I poured it into work. I started volunteering for projects no one else wanted, stayed late when it made sense, pushed myself in ways I hadn't before. For the first time in years, my effort wasn't about proving anything to them, it was about proving something to myself. Outside of work, I started cooking more safe meals, free from the ingredient that could have killed me. I joined a beginner's gym class. I even reached out to a couple of old friends I'd drifted away from. The more I built this other life, the less oxygen my family's noise had. Melissa's digs didn't sting as much when I heard about them secondhand. Daniel's smugness sounded small compared to the small, steady wins I was racking up. But the silence didn't go unnoticed. A cousin mentioned that Melissa was telling people I was pouting to make everyone feel guilty. Daniel apparently joked that I'd show up at Christmas wearing a medical alert bracelet just for attention. My dad told relatives he was giving me space so I could cool off. It should have hurt. Instead, it clarified everything. These people weren't going to change. If I kept showing up, they'd keep feeding on whatever reaction they could squeeze from me. The only way forward was to stop playing the role, but not before making sure they understood why. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My mom, in one of her rare short calls where her voice stayed low, mentioned that my dad's 60th birthday was coming up. Melissa was planning a big surprise party. Formal dress, she said. She's going all out. I didn't tell Mom, but in that moment, I knew. That night wasn't going to go the way they thought it would. The first piece of the puzzle fell into place without me lifting a finger. A catering contact I'd met through a cooking class, a guy named Trevor, posted on social media about booking a huge private party on the same date Mom had mentioned. The location? A high-end event hall downtown. The photos he tagged made it obvious it was the same place Melissa had chosen for Dad's 60th. I didn't comment, but my mind was already mapping possibilities. Not only did I know the location, I also knew the catering team and I had their direct number. A few days later, Trevor texted me about a smaller gig they needed help with the week before the big party. I said yes without hesitation. If I worked that event, I'd have FaceTime with the head chef and staff, the same ones who'd be handling the birthday. Sure enough, during a lull that night, I learned the full dinner menu, the setup schedule, and even that Melissa had requested surprise speeches after dessert. That last part was gold. It meant there'd be a moment when the room's attention would be laser-focused on whoever was at the microphone, and once the words were out, no one could stuff them back in. I didn't say a thing about my plans. When Melissa's official invitation hit the family group chat complete with black tie, no exceptions in bold letters, I replied simply, looking forward to it, no sarcasm, no clue to tip her off. The week before the party, I rehearsed my speech. Not the dramatic finger-pointing kind they'd expect from overly sensitive Ariana. This would be calm, measured, the kind of truth that lands harder because you don't dress it up. I also pulled out the allergy report from my desk. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was the equivalent of a loaded weapon, except this one didn't harm it exposed. The day of the party, I got ready slowly, deliberately. The dress was simple but elegant, deep navy satin that fell just right. I pinned my hair up, kept the makeup understated. If they were expecting me to fade into the background, they'd notice before I even spoke that I'd decided otherwise. When I walked into the event hall, Trevor spotted me from across the room and gave a subtle nod. The catering team had labeled every dish on the buffet, right down to the sauce ingredients. It was a small gesture, but I knew it would eat at Melissa the second she saw it. For the first hour, I played along, mingled, smiled. Let Daniel crack his little jokes. Let Richard do his booming laugh routine. Let Melissa make her hostess rounds like she was royalty. Every so often, I'd catch her glancing at me from across the room, that slight crease in her brow when things didn't quite match her script. Dinner went smoothly. I made a point of filling my plate, sampling small portions of everything because every single dish was safe. Melissa didn't comment, but I could see the faint tension in her jaw. Then the lights dimmed slightly, and the microphone appeared at the front of the room. This was it, the speeches she'd arranged. The moment she expected people to gush about Richard's work ethic, or Daniel's charm, or Melissa's flawless event planning. Melissa went first, of course. Her toast was long and syrupy, with just enough "family is about laughter" thrown in to jab at me without saying my name. Daniel followed with a few awkward jokes, ending predictably with, "And let's make sure Ariana stays away from the barbecue table this time." Polite laughter bubbled through the room. That was my cue. I stood, letting the quiet stretch just a little too long. Melissa's forced smile faltered as she handed me the mic. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," I began, keeping my voice even. "But since we're here celebrating family, I think it's a good time to clear something up." The room settled. 2 months ago, at a cookout, I had what my doctor later confirmed was a severe allergic reaction. My airway started to close. My blood pressure dropped. If the ambulance had been 10 minutes later, I might not be standing here tonight. I reached into my clutch and unfolded the report. This is the medical documentation, every symptom, every detail. I keep it with me now in case it happens again. And in the middle of that reaction, my own family accused me of faking it. They laughed. They turned it into a game. They gave out a prize. A murmur rippled through the guests. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because for years I've been the joke, and I let it slide. But this," I tapped the paper lightly. "This is the line. I'm done playing that role." I handed the report to the nearest cousin. "Pass it around. It's not my word against anyone's. It's the truth." Then I placed the mic back on the stand and walked to my seat, glass of water in hand. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. And I could tell, even before the whispers began, that tonight's script was no longer in Melissa's hands. For a few seconds, no one moved. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the lights and the soft clink of a wine glass being set down. Then came the whispers, low at first. Just little threads of sound weaving between tables. I could see people leaning toward each other, their eyes flicking between me, Melissa, and my dad. The polite smiles were gone. Melissa stayed frozen beside the podium, her glass of champagne still in hand. Her expression was a perfect storm of disbelief and calculation, as if she was mentally rifling through possible ways to spin this back in her favor. Richard's face darkened. Not embarrassment, anger. The kind of defensiveness that had shut down every argument I'd ever tried to have with him. His jaw worked, like he was chewing on the words he wanted to throw at me. Daniel? He just looked stunned, his smirk wiped clean, replaced by a half-laugh that didn't quite know if it should exist. Then, from somewhere near the middle of the room, a voice spoke up. I didn't realize it was that serious. Ariana. I'm sorry. Heads turned toward the speaker, my cousin Jordan, who'd been at the cookout. His voice was clear enough for half the room to hear. Melissa's smile wavered. Another voice chimed in from the opposite side. Yeah, that's not a joke. You could have died. Now the murmurs weren't whispers anymore. They were questions, layered and loud enough to make Melissa step back from the mic. Why didn't you take it seriously? Did you really give out a barbecue gift card after that? Who even does that? The catering staff, who had been quietly clearing plates near the back, paused just long enough to hear and exchange glances. One of them, Trevor, spoke up. For the record, those ingredient labels tonight? That was because Ariana told us what happened. We didn't want to risk a repeat. The fact that the team had taken my story seriously while my own family hadn't, that detail landed harder than anything I could have said myself. Richard stood then, raising a hand like he could command the noise to stop. It was all in good fun. No, it wasn't, someone interrupted. And that was it. The dam broke. Voices layered over each other, some sharp, some disappointed. A few people avoided looking at Melissa and Richard entirely, turning their chairs toward me instead. I stayed seated, calm, letting it all wash over me. For once, I wasn't scrambling to defend myself. The truth was doing the work. Melissa attempted a laugh, high and thin. All right, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. You made it big, Jordan shot back. You turned it into entertainment. I watched Melissa's posture stiffen, her control slipping through her fingers in real time. Daniel tried to step in with, "We were just teasing, Ari, you know that." But his voice lacked its usual bite. I met his gaze and said nothing. Silence can be louder than shouting. From there, the room fractured. A few relatives slipped out early. Others stayed but avoided the front tables entirely. The speeches Melissa had planned for after dessert never happened. The energy had shifted, and no amount of small talk could stitch it back together. When dessert was served, I stayed at my seat, chatting quietly with Jordan and a couple of others who now looked at me differently, less like the family's designated punchline, more like someone they might have overlooked for too long. Eventually, I stood, collected my clutch, and headed for the exit. Melissa was near the podium, staring out over the half-empty tables. Richard stood beside her, his expression tight. I walked past them without slowing. Ariana, Richard muttered, low enough that only I could hear. You didn't have to do that here. I stopped just long enough to meet his eyes. You didn't have to do it in the first place. Then I kept walking. The night air outside was crisp, carrying the muffled echoes of the room I'd just left. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't carrying their laughter home with me. They weren't laughing anymore. And more importantly, I didn't need them to understand why I'd done it. The truth was out there now, woven into their own network of whispers and side-eyes. It would follow them long after I'd gone. When I got to my car, I sat for a moment, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. No shaking, no tightness in my chest, just the quiet, steady rhythm of my own breathing. I didn't know if this was the end of their games. People like Melissa and Richard don't change overnight, if at all. But something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. Because now, they knew that if they tried to drag me back into that role again, I could and would take the stage without warning. And next time, I wouldn't even need the report.